What's going on, everyone? Scott here. Welcome back to the channel. So Michigan State football kicked off the 2024 fall camp season last week as they prepare for the 2024 football season coming up, kicking off here in a couple of weeks on Friday night, August 30th against the Florida Atlantic Owls. Going into fall camp, there's quite a few position battles we are looking forward to see play out over the next couple weeks, and honestly, throughout the first couple games of the season to see where everyone in those positions kind of land on the depth chart. Now, so in this video, not going to go over all the positions. I do eventually want to go over the positions that we don't cover in this video, but we're going to go through a couple position groups from the offensive side and the defensive side going into fall camp that I think are the most intriguing and I think will have a big part of whether MSU has a successful season this year or does not have a successful season this year. So before we go ahead and jump into that, if you could just hit that like and subscribe button down below if you do enjoy the content and want to see more Michigan State football content coming up the next couple weeks leading up until kickoff, and then obviously after that all MSU sports and other college football stuff in general as we move through the season. So first, let's jump in. We'll start in the defensive back room. As of right now, in my opinion, Chance Rucker is the only guy that I for sure have penciled in to the starting position. Other guys in the straight up corner role that could fill out that other corner slot on the other side. Spartan vet Charles Brantley, who is a redshirt junior. Seems like he's been here for about like 7 years though, but redshirt junior Charles Brantley. Got transfer Ed Woods, a redshirt senior. He's coming in from Arizona State. Then you got Ade Willie, he's a junior, and redshirt junior transfer from North Carolina, Legend Cavazos. If I had to peg the top two right now, as I said before, it'd probably be Chance Rucker. And then on the other side, I'd put Ed Woods. Woods was a very highly sought after transfer from Arizona State, and MSU actually beat out Alabama for him in the transfer portal commitment race this off season. Woods is a guy that has experience, starting experience. Also, actually had one of his best games last year against Oregon, had an interception and a pass breakup. He's physical and will get in there and force a couple fumbles and tackles for loss as well, as we've seen throughout his career looking through some of his statistics. Right behind those two guys, I would probably put vets like Ade Willie and Legends Cavazos in that mix for being in that starting role or heavy playing rotation. At the nickel position, I think it'll be more than likely Angelo Gross, who we've seen play that position a handful of times throughout his career here at Michigan State. He's a redshirt senior, has experience, as we've said, one in that position, and has been around the block at a couple different spots on the defense. And if it is not him in there, I expect Dylan Tatum, who I believe, I'm not going to talk about the safeties in this video, but I believe he'll be one of the starting safeties back there with Malik Spencer. I think when Angelo Gross isn't one of those starters, I think Dylan Tatum is a candidate to slide down into that nickel spot and fill in, see some time there as well. I think Dylan Tatum is kind of just that. I'm not going to talk about him, obviously, since I just said I think he's going to be a safety. So I'm not talking about the safety room in this video. But I think he's a guy in this defense that you can really plug him in a lot of different places. We've seen that for him throughout his career. We've seen him play a little bit of safety. Saw him play a little bit of cornerback last year. We saw him play in this nickel spot last year. So I really think he's a guy that you can move around as needed. But as of right now, I think for that nickel spot, I have Angelo Gross. But I know a lot of people are intrigued by transfer Nakai Martinez from UCF sliding into that nickel role as well. So that's someone in terms of the fan base that seems to be excited about moving into that nickel position as well. So that's something to keep an eye on as well going forward. Next up, the defensive line rotation, arguably probably the biggest question mark with the departures of Derek Harmon and Simeon Barrow this offseason. Right now, I'm fairly confident in saying Jalen Thompson, who's a sophomore, had a strong close to last year, and six-year senior Chris Bogle will be starting somewhere on the defensive line. So who is going to occupy the two tackle positions on the defensive line is what I'm looking for. As I said, I think the edges will be Jalen Thompson and Chris Bogle. Some of the options, you got sixth-year guy Maverick Hansen. You got redshirt senior Avery Dunn. You got transfer sixth year Quindarius Dunnigan from Middle Tennessee State. Then you got Daquan Dowse, a grad transfer from Georgia Tech. Got Jalen Satchel, a redshirt junior from Old Dominion. And then some youngsters. Alex Van Summeren, a redshirt sophomore who's battled through some injuries throughout his early career. Then you have Ben Nelson, a redshirt sophomore, and Ben Roberts, transfer redshirt sophomore from Oregon. Right now, I think I'd put a slight lean on veteran Maverick Hansen for sure, being in that starting four to start the season, at least at one of those tackle positions. If I had to peg another starter right now, I think I would go with Daquan Dowse, the transfer from Georgia Tech. He has that power for playing experience. Some of the other guys I think will be incredible additions that we've got through the transfer portal in terms of Quindarius Dunnigan and Jalen Satchel. Some of the other guys as well, not mentioned here, I think will eventually pan out, but coming from positions or places where they maybe haven't played a lot or is a smaller level, I think it'll eventually, translate for them, but, maybe not to start the year. This is what I think to start the year. If we were doing a list of what I think the starting lineups for these position groups will be at the end of the year, I think it'd be completely different. And this is definitely one of those positions as well that I think will be a lot different if you see what the starting lineup is. Granted, everyone healthy in the end of November as opposed to the August 30th opener against the Owls. They're Florida Atlantic. But I do think the guys, as I mentioned, Jalen Satchel and Quindarius Dunnigan will be closely involved, definitely in that two deep rotation to start the year. Next up, switching sides of the ball to the offensive side, specifically the offensive line. We know for certain Tanner Miller, the 6-year transfer from Oregon State, came over with Jonathan Smith and his staff from Oregon State, will be starting at center. But filling in around him is where some of the questions lie for a group that definitely needs improvement from the last 2 years, to say the least, and really even go back to the Kenneth Walker year, 3 years ago, 2021. They didn't call Kenneth Walker the eraser for nothing. He erased a lot of mistakes from that defensive line, and a group that has needed improvement for the better part of the last decade. We've seen some spots where the offensive line has done some good, but for the most part, this is far from that, 2013-14, where I'd say peak Michigan State offensive line was. Not saying there haven't been good players across the offensive line or there haven't been some solid units, but, this is an offensive line that we need to start seeing some improvement from, especially with, new staff, new position coaches coming in to lead that group. My best guess for a lineup right now: left tackle Brandon Baldwin, left guard transfer Luke Newman from Holy Cross, center Tanner Miller, transfer again, Christian Phillips at right guard, and at right tackle Ashton Lepo. Now I expect young guys like Gavin Brocious, Stanton Ramel, who spent the last year recovering from injuries, to rotate in often as well. I think both of those guys will definitely be in the two deep, in addition to Cole Dellinger, Dallas Fincher, and even Jacob Merritt, who we saw in the spring game a little bit. Lastly, I want to talk about the wide receiver rotation. The only starter that I feel is locked in to this point is Montori Foster. He's a redshirt senior, been around the block, started every game last year for Michigan State as Michigan State's best returning wide receiver in terms of production. Filling in those other two spots, I believe, is where the questions lie. I believe there is quite a bit of talent in the wide receiver room, but a lot of it is young talent. Filling in those other two spots, my prediction for the two outside spots to start the year is Jerron Glover, redshirt sophomore, who was in the transfer portal and being looked at by Georgia, and decided to come back to Michigan State. So that was a big win for this new staff coming in. Jonathan Smith, Courtney Hawkins obviously staying on. Being able to keep a guy like Jerron Glover, who's being looked at by these top SEC schools and top schools in the country, to come back and stay at Michigan State. And then also, I think this one might be a surprise because we haven't seen a lot of them. We saw a little bit towards the end of last year, but I think the other starting spot's going to go to redshirt sophomore Antonio Gates Jr. Now, let me put my tinfoil hat on a little bit here. Am I putting too much stock in Antonio Gates Jr. getting that number 1 jersey? I probably am, but I think there's something to that. We saw a few flashes last year when we did see him. He had 1 touchdown last year, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was 1 touchdown last year and started seeing some time towards the end of last year. But he's a guy that I think can come in and he has all the talent. If he can get in, get an opportunity and, kind of get things rolling earlier in the year within those first 4 games, then, I think he's a guy that could have a big year for Michigan State going forward. However, I believe by the end of the year, true freshman Nick Marsh from River Rouge will be starting. He's way too talented to keep off the field, and we've already heard glowing reviews for him from the first week of fall camp and even throughout the summer. Yes, what are you going to hear? No, he's been horrible, dropping passes, been doing all this. No, that's what you're probably going to hear from most players if they're talked about during fall camp. But I think Nick Marsh is just too talented to keep off the field. I think he'll be in the 2 deep immediately to start the year, and I think, probably by mid-October, he'll be in that starting group. I also believe Alante Brown, who's a redshirt senior, will slot in as a backup slot receiver right behind Montori Foster, who I believe will be starting at that slot position. And I think Isaiah Johnson, who's a redshirt freshman, will be in the 2 deep as well. We saw a lot of him in the spring game this past April. But I think this is a talented room. I think at the beginning of the year, you'll see a lot of fluctuation between the 2 deep till, some guys kind of emerge. But I think this is an exciting group looking at going into the season. Now, as I said at the beginning of this video, there are plenty of other interesting storylines going into this fall camp and the season opener against FAU. But these are the 4 position groups that jumped out to me immediately. I still want to come back and talk about the rest of the roster. Obviously, quarterback, we know Aiden Chiles is going to be starting. The running back room, I think, is interesting, but I think the running back room is, for the most part, Nate Carter, and then K'Ron Lynch-Adams transfer, and then Brandon Tullis, true freshman. Tight end room's interesting too, but obviously it seems like Jack Velling and Brendan Parachek are the top 2 guys there. And then other positions on the defensive side of the ball, want to go back, talk about linebackers and safeties a little bit, but we'll do that as we inch closer to kickoff here on August 30th. Friday night in Spartan Stadium. Stripe the stadium. Cannot wait. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.